picture this. You're watching an animated video, and the character moves perfectly, but something feels off. Maybe they're floating weirdly above the ground, or their hand clips right through an object. That's the problem with most animation models today. They only focus on motion, ignoring how characters interact with their environment. Enter Animate Anyone 2, a new approach from Alibaba that doesn't just animate characters, but makes them fit into the world around them. Instead of treating the background like an afterthought, this model extracts environment details directly from the source video. It learns how characters should stand on surfaces, hold objects, and move naturally within their surroundings. Now let's dive in. Oh, by the way, we just rolled out a splashboard on our website. This handy tracker shows which papers are getting the most votes over the past 30 days. As soon as any paper hits 10 votes, we'll jump in and create a deep dive video for it on this channel. So if you love a paper, head over to ribbitribbit.co and vote for it now. We can't wait to see which paper you pick next.
The core idea behind Animate Anyone 2 is to go beyond just copying motion from one video to another. Previous methods typically only took movement data from a reference video, which often made characters feel disconnected from their surroundings. This approach fixes that by also considering the environment in the animation process. Instead of focusing solely on motion, the model removes the character from the background, extracts the scene details, and then ensures that when the new character is inserted, it fits naturally into that environment. This way, we avoid those awkward floating effects or strange character placements that you may have seen before. The method also introduces a shape-agnostic mask, which helps blend characters smoothly into the background without causing shape-related distortions. Another key component is an object guider, which extracts details from objects the character interacts with, making those interactions more realistic. Finally, there is pose modulation, a strategy that helps the model adapt to different kinds of motion while maintaining character consistency. Look at Figure 1 here. It shows a clear comparison. The old approach relied only on motion, while this new version takes both motion and environment into account. The result? More seamless and realistic animations, where characters move naturally within their settings. What does this mean for practical applications? It could benefit filmmaking, advertising, or any area that relies on digital character animation. By capturing not just movement, but also how characters should exist in their surroundings, Animate Anyone 2 brings animation closer to realism. Now, let's see how this connects to previous approaches and how Animate Anyone 2 addresses some of the long-standing challenges in character-environment integration. Most character animation models today rely on motion signals taken from a different video, while the background remains static. That's a big issue. Characters end up moving, but they don't really interact with their environment. The relationship between characters and their surroundings often looks artificial, and interactions with objects don't feel natural. Have you noticed those awkward moments where someone's feet seem to slide across the ground or their hand doesn't quite grab a doorknob? Some previous attempts tried to fix this. One approach stitched together outputs from multiple models, but that produced strange visual artifacts. Another focused on animating human-object interactions, but proved too simplistic. A third method tried splitting characters, backgrounds, and occlusions into different layers, yet it still struggled with complex interactions. Animate Anyone 2 tackles these problems by extracting both movement and environmental information from the original video. The model learns how a character should naturally belong in a space. First, it removes the character from the background and fills in that gap with the animated version in a way that feels seamless. A shape-agnostic mask keeps the boundaries smooth, and an object guider ensures interactions with objects look genuine. Then pose modulation helps the character move fluidly through different actions. What's the payoff? More realistic character animations where movements match the environment. According to the authors, the evaluation shows 3 major improvements. Characters blend into surroundings more effectively, interact with objects more naturally, and handle a wider array of movements without losing consistency. Next, let's break down the system's overall architecture and the roles of each component in more detail. So how does this framework piece everything together? It takes an input image and a source video, then splits them into motion, environment, and object interactions. Instead of treating animation like a simple cutout over a static background, it ensures that characters interact with objects and space in a believable way. The key parts are as follows. First, we have environment formulation. The model removes the character from the background, extracts scene details, and uses them as input so it knows how the character should fit in. Next, there's object injection, where a lightweight module extracts features of objects that the character touches and weaves them into the animation. Then there's pose modulation, which refines how the model deals with body movements. It uses both pose and depth information, applying layers of 2D and 3D convolutions to keep limb relationships accurate. This avoids that stiff, puppet-like motion you might have seen in simpler systems. Lastly, spatial blending merges object details with animation noise, ensuring that objects and characters appear to occupy the same reality. Picture a scenario where a character is supposed to sit on a chair. Without spatial blending, you might get weird overlaps or a mismatch in perspective. All these components work together so that Animate Anyone 2 generates smoother, more natural animations. Curious how the model learns to do this? Let's see how it handles masks and how that affects shape and context integration. A big challenge in character animation is making sure the character actually fits into the scene. Usually, models just paste a character onto a background, often leading to odd inconsistencies. Here, the solution is to train with a flexible mask rather than a rigid one. They call it a shape-agnostic mask. Instead of strictly following the character's outline, the mask is broken into blocks and smoothed out. This keeps the model from obsessing over precise body shapes. Why is that important? Because, during training, the model sees many characters with various body types and outfits. If the masks were always too precise, the model would memorize specific outlines and struggle to generalize to new shapes or clothing styles. The shape-agnostic approach forces it to think in terms of the broader scene context, resulting in more natural compositions. To handle scale issues, they also use random scaling augmentation. Sometimes the shape-agnostic mask can be bigger than the character itself, which risks making characters look too small in the final animation. By rescaling the character and the objects it interacts with, they keep the final animation realistic. Makes sense, right? It's basically teaching the model, hey, don't just cut and paste, understand the surroundings, and place the character accordingly. Next, let's take a closer look at how the model injects object features so that everything in a scene interacts properly. Animating characters in ways that respect object interactions can be tricky. After all, what if the character is supposed to open a door or pick up a cup? If the model doesn't account for it, those interactions look off. That's why this system injects object-specific features into the animation pipeline. First comes object localization, done either by a vision language model or by manual annotation of object positions. Once identified, a segmentation model extracts their masks. But simply throwing object features into the network doesn't yield great results, because person-object relationships can be quite nuanced. A hand resting on a table needs perfect alignment, or it'll hover oddly. So the model uses an object guider. This lightweight module downsamples the object features and aligns them with the main animation flow. Then there's spatial blending, which mixes object latents and noise using a 2D convolution layer. This smoothing process avoids those distracting edges or floats. Now for the character's actual motion. That's where pose modulation comes in. Many existing methods just track skeletal poses, but that alone can't capture depth relationships, leading to unnatural movements when limbs intersect objects or other people. This new method combines skeleton pose with depth info through a cross-attention mechanism, letting limbs learn from one another so everything remains coordinated. For training, they used around 100,000 character videos, running on 8 NVIDIA A100 GPUs. Frames were cropped, and backgrounds were placed dynamically to prevent the model from memorizing specific scenes. That way, it generalizes better to new environments. Got all that? It's a lot of moving parts, but the main idea is that integrating object features and depth-aware pose information makes the character move in a way that truly respects the environment. Next, let's see how they handle longer videos and the all-important evaluation metrics. Generating long video sequences can be challenging. How do we keep them smooth and consistent without weird flickers between frames? The technique here is to segment long videos into smaller clips and ensure smooth transitions by referencing the final frame of one clip when starting the next. Check out Figure 4 and see how well the model weaves characters into their environments. Whether it's someone riding a horse or playing basketball, the characters no longer look like they're just pasted onto the scene. They appear to truly interact with it. Let's talk about the metrics in Table 1, where they compare this method to previous models. Several metrics are listed. SSIM, or Structural Similarity Index Measure. Higher is better. It checks how similar generated frames are to reference frames in structure and luminance, PSNR, or peak signal-to-noise ratio. Also, higher is better. It measures how well the generated frames preserve fine details. LPIPS, or Learned Perceptual Image Patch Similarity. Lower is better. It captures perceptual differences in images. FVD, or Fréché Video Distance. Lower is better. It evaluates the overall quality and temporal consistency in videos. In these comparisons, Animate Anyone 2 beats out older models like Magic Animate and Animate Anyone 1, especially when fine-tuned on the TikTok dataset. To keep the comparison fair, they used the same reference background for every model. They also tested both a TikTok-only training and a version with extra pre-training. Unsurprisingly, the pre-training version performed best, showing that diverse data helps. So, the takeaway here is, this isn't just about moving a character around. It's about an animation system that respects the environment so well that characters look like they've always been part of the scene. Next, let's see further evaluations on how this method handles motion and environment integration together. So how well does the model really perform in practice? It's not just about moving a character, it's about making sure it fits seamlessly into its environment. That's exactly what these experiments aim to measure. Check out Figure 5, where different animation models are compared side by side without backgrounds. This lets us focus purely on character motion. The results suggest that Animate Anyone 2 creates smoother, more realistic movements than the other methods. Table 2 backs this up with higher scores in crucial image quality metrics, meaning the animations are more visually stable and appealing. But movement alone isn't enough. Characters also need to interact with objects and surroundings. Figure 6 shows how different methods handle those interactions. The simplest baseline just pastes characters onto the scene, causing glaring inconsistencies. Another model called MyMO tries blending but can produce artifacts because it depends heavily on background inpainting. Animate Anyone 2 avoids these issues and achieves a more natural integration. Look at Table 3 for additional evidence. It measures performance against a pseudo-integration baseline, and you'll notice that Animate Anyone 2 scores better. This indicates it's superior at handling both the character's motion and the environment affordance. Bottom line, this method doesn't break down in more complex scenes, nor does it require a lot of pre-processing hacks. It generalizes well to various settings, delivering animations that look far more believable. Ready to see what each piece of the system is contributing? Let's look at their ablation study. To verify which parts of the system really matter, the authors ran an ablation study, testing each component separately. It turns out every piece has a significant impact on the final quality of character animations. Look at Figure 7 to see how different approaches handle environment formulation. If the mask is too precise around the character, you get sharp but unnatural edges. If you go too loose with bounding boxes, you introduce background distortions that ruin the scene. The proposed shape-agnostic approach strikes a balance by blending characters more contextually. Figure 8 zeroes in on object modeling. Simply merging object details can lead to misalignment, such as a floating ball instead of one being firmly gripped. But with spatial blending, the model learns to handle object-character interactions much more convincingly. Next, check out Figure 9 for pose modulation. Without it, limbs can go out of place. With depth-aware coordination, the arms and legs move in a way that feels truly lifelike. Finally, Table 4 provides the quantitative breakdown. The complete model, which includes both spatial blending and pose modulation, scores the highest. This confirms that each component, environment formulation, shape-agnostic masking, object guiding, and pose modulation, plays an essential role in producing natural, realistic results. The authors do acknowledge some limitations, like difficulties in fine-grained hand-object coordination or shape distortions for extremely different body types. There's also the ethical concern regarding potential deepfake misuse. Still, with detection techniques available, the constructive uses of this method could be huge for filmmaking, game development, and digital content creation. And there you have it. Animate Anyone 2 offers a more robust way to animate characters in videos by weaving together motion, environment details, object interactions, and pose refinements, all aiming for animations that look like they truly belong in their scenes. Thanks for joining us today. Happy learning and stretching together.